Hello and welcome back. We have got a really fascinating discussion lined up for you today, one that challenges how we think about our careers. But, before we jump in, just a quick bit of housekeeping I have to take care of. Please remember that upon completing the quiz associated with this session, you will earn your CPD certificate. So keep an ear out for those details. You'll need them.
And honestly, it's definitely worth paying close attention today. This isn't just about ticking a box for compliance. We're tackling something that sits at the very foundation of the financial sector.
I completely agree. I was thinking about this. The entire financial world, every single transaction, it's all built on trust, isn't it?
Complete.
If I give you my money to manage, I'm not just trusting the certificate on your wall. I'm trusting that you know what to do when things get, messy.
Precisely. And that distinction between the certificate and the ability to handle the mess, that's the core problem we really need to unpack. For a very long time, we've assumed that a degree or a qualification meant you were competent.
Right.
We assumed, because you knew the rules, you could play the game.
It's that finish line mentality. You pass the exam, you frame the paper, and you think, great, I'm a professional now. I'm done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in today's world, especially in the South African financial landscape, that paper is just the starting line. It's the ticket to the stadium, not a guarantee you can actually play.
So that's our mission for this session. We're exploring what it means to cultivate professional competence in a shifting landscape. We'll look at why the technical stuff isn't enough, this idea that competence is a living thing, like a muscle, and what practical steps you really need to take to stay relevant.
And it's a shift that, changes everything. How we learn, how we work, how we act when no one's watching.
Okay, so let's start by defining competence, because I think most people would say it just means I passed the exam or I memorized the regulations. Why is that not enough?
It's a really common misconception. We tend to confuse knowledge with competence, but the sources we're looking at make a very clear distinction. Knowledge is static, competence is active, it's broader. It's the ability to apply that knowledge effectively and responsibly in the real world.
So it's a difference between knowing how an engine works in theory and actually being able to fix it on the side of the road when it's pouring rain.
That's a perfect analogy. Competence is demonstrated in action, not just in theory. It's not just about understanding the products. It's about interpreting information, using sound judgment, and making decisions under pressure.
Which is a lot harder than just picking C on a multiple choice test.
Much harder. And to really get our heads around this, the research breaks competence down into 4 pillars.
Okay.
Think of it like a table. You lose one leg, the whole thing tips over.
All right, lay them on me. What's pillar number 1?
The first is technical knowledge, and we're not dismissing this. This is the foundation. You absolutely cannot practice without it. You need to understand products, tax, risk management.
Right. That's table stakes. If you don't know that, you shouldn't be in the room.
Correct. But then we get to the second pillar, applied skill. And this is where the gap, it often appears. This is about translating that book knowledge into a solution for a specific human being.
This is where the textbook meets reality.
Exactly. In a textbook, the client has clear goals and perfect records. In reality, the client is going through a messy divorce, has lost their documents, and is emotional. Applied skill is navigating that messiness.
I like that distinction. It moves beyond the hypothetical. What about the third pillar?
The third is professional judgment. This is so crucial. It's the ability to make decisions when there is no single correct answer.
The gray areas.
The gray areas, yes. We operate with uncertainty, with incomplete information. A competent professional can look at a situation, assess the risks, and say, okay, given what we know and what we don't, this is the best path forward.
That feels like the most human part of the job. It's intuition backed by real experience. So what's the fourth?
The fourth is ethical reasoning. And notice I say reasoning, not just compliance. It's not about memorizing the code of conduct. It's having the ability to spot an ethical dilemma and then act to uphold public trust.
Even when there's huge commercial pressure pushing you the other way.
Especially then. It's easy to be ethical when it pays. True competence is being ethical when it costs you.
Wow. Okay, so knowledge, skill, judgment, and ethics. It makes passing the exam seem like a very small piece of the puzzle.
It is, and that leads to a metaphor that really stood out to me. The sources describe competence as a muscle.
I highlighted that too. I thought it was such a powerful image. Break that down for us.
Well, it just works perfectly. Think of an athlete. A qualification is like proof of strength at that specific moment. You built the muscle up. But what happens if you stop exercising it? If you stop learning and stop wrestling with these problems?
It atrophies, gets weak, it shrinks.
Exactly. Competence isn't a trophy you put on a shelf and keep forever. It's a dynamic capability. If you don't use it, you lose it. You might still have the certificate, but you no longer have the actual competence.
And this is really relevant because of the context in South Africa right now. The whole education landscape is changing, isn't it?
It is. It's undergoing a quiet but massive transformation. For years, the South African model was very linear and time-based. It was all about inputs. How many hours did you spend in a classroom?
Which assumes that if you sat in the chair for 100 hours, you learned 100 hours worth of stuff, which we all know isn't true.
We know it's not always true, no. Now, the shift is toward an outcomes and competence-focused model. The system is starting to care less about how long you studied and more about what you can actually do.
That seems much fairer, but tougher. Why the shift now?
It's driven by the environment. The world is more regulated, technology is advancing so quickly, and clients are more demanding. The old models were leaving graduates with theory, but very few adaptive skills.
So we were graduating people who were great at passing tests, but maybe not so great at being financial professionals.
That's a good way to put it. That's exactly it. And that creates a gap.
Okay, so how do we bridge that gap? If I'm listening to this right now as a professional or a manager, what do I actually do?
Right, this brings us to the practical strategies. Since competence is a living capability, it needs active maintenance. You have to actually do the push-ups.
So what's the gym for professional competence?
The first piece of equipment is structured workplace learning. And to be clear, this isn't just go sit at your desk and figure it out. It has to be deliberate. Job rotations, hands-on projects, scenario-based exercises.
So putting people in situations where they have to make a call, but with a safety net.
Precisely. You simulate the complexity. You don't just throw a new hire in with your biggest client. You give them a scenario that mirrors reality. A complex estate planning case, maybe, and you see how they handle it.
And this is where having a guide comes in, surely, because doing that alone just leads to panic.
That's the second strategy, the power of mentorship. You can't overstate this. Mentors bridge that theory-practice gap. A textbook can't teach you how to read a client's body language or how to deliver bad news.
That's the art of the profession, the so-called soft skills that are actually the hard skills.
It is, and supervision goes right along with that. It ensures professionals can apply these skills safely before they fly solo. It's the mentor saying, okay, I see why you chose option A, but did you consider this tax implication over here in B? It creates that feedback loop.
Now, there was another concept mentioned, and I think people might roll their eyes at it at first. Reflective practice.
Yes, it can sound a bit like keeping a diary, can't it? Dear diary, the market was volatile today.
Right.
But it's actually a rigorous professional tool. It just means regularly assessing your own decisions.
So what does that look like in practice for a busy planner?
It looks like a post-game analysis. After a big client meeting, you take 5 minutes. You ask yourself, why did I advise that? What biases might have influenced me? If I could do it again, what would I change? It forces self-awareness.
It stops you from just running on autopilot.
Exactly. And autopilot is the enemy of competence in a world that's constantly changing.
That leads us to everyone's favorite topic, CPD, continuous professional development. For so many people, it feels like a chore, a tax.
It's just a compliance hurdle to jump over.
Yeah, let me watch this video on double speed just to get my point.
And that's the mindset that has to break. The argument is that CPD must move from being a requirement to an intentional process. It shouldn't be about keeping your license. It should be about staying capable, credible, and relevant.
So instead of asking, what's the easiest way to get my points, you should be asking, what do I actually need to learn to be better at my job next year?
Correct. If you're weak on crypto, do a course on that. If you struggle with difficult conversations, focus there. It turns CPD into a strategic advantage, not just a box to tick.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier because the sources are very firm on this. The link between competence and ethics.
Yes, they're inseparable.
We tend to think of them as separate things. You have the smart person and you have the nice person.
But the sources are clear. You cannot be competent if you are not ethical. A technically brilliant person with poor ethics is, well, they're dangerous. They're a liability to the entire sector.
Because they're the ones who cause the scandals that lead to more regulation for everybody else.
Right. They erode that trust we talked about.
Right.
And with this shift away from rigid rules, the burden of ethics falls more squarely on the individual.
What does that mean practically?
It means there isn't always going to be a rule for every single situation. A professional has to act ethically even when nobody is watching. It's about the spirit of the law, not just the letter.
That's a high bar. And professionals don't work in a vacuum, right?
No, they don't. And that's why it isn't just on the individual. The stakeholders have a huge role. Employers, for one.
If my boss is telling me to hit a sales target or I'm fired, it's hard to prioritize ethical nuance.
Exactly. The culture has to support it. Employers need to create environments that encourage ethical practice, not just profitable practice. And they need to reward the right behaviors.
And then you have the professional bodies. Their role isn't just to collect fees.
No, they set the standards. They create the frameworks and codes of conduct. But ultimately, while the body sets the standard and the employer sets the culture, the individual has to take ownership.
So looking forward then, we know things are shifting. What does a future-fit competence model look like?
I think the key word is adaptability. A future-fit professional is one who can anticipate changes in tech, in products, in regulations, and pivot. If your competence is rigid, you will break.
And I guess that means learning isn't one-size-fits-all anymore.
Not at all. The future is about personalization. A junior planner needs very different exercises for their competence muscle than a senior wealth manager does.
It really is a total shift in mindset. We have to stop seeing education as a once-off milestone.
It's a lifelong professional responsibility. That's the phrase the sources use. You are never, ever done becoming competent.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We've established that competence is so much more than a piece of paper.
It's that combination: technical knowledge, applied skill, professional judgment, and ethical reasoning.
And it's a living thing, a muscle that needs mentorship, reflection, and real-world application to stay strong.
And here in South Africa, the focus is shifting to what you can actually do, not just what you know on paper.
Which puts the power and the responsibility back in the hands of the professional.
It does, but it demands work.
So before we sign off, I know you always like to leave us with something to think about. What's the final thought for today?
Well, if we accept this idea that competence is a muscle, I want to leave every listener with this question. If you had to re-qualify for your job right now, based only on your ability to handle a complex, real-world crisis, not your past exams, but your ability to solve a messy problem this second, would you pass?
Oof, that's a confronting question, but a necessary one.
It's the only one that really matters.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder your own professional fitness. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And don't forget that quiz for your CPD certificate. Until next time, stay curious.